Angels, a violent criminal is hunting down young black women at a time when Southern California is plagued by a tidal wave of serial killers.
You had the Hillside Slayer, you had Richard Ramirez, you had the Freeway Killer.
Bodies were piling up in the morgue, labeled Jane Doe, and it was overwhelming for law enforcement.
I'd go back to talk to the detectives and ask them, what are you looking for? I said, we don't know.
But after more than a decade of terror, the killings suddenly stop.
He went quiet, it seems, for 14 years.
Until a scientific breakthrough and the bravery of two survivors brings the case roaring back to life.
You have the courage to take the stand and face the man who tried to kill her and raped her. She's a true hero.
The pain that man did to me.
To his neighbors, he'd seemed like one of the good guys.
He was like that neighbor that everybody went to.
Everybody loved him. He was a caring man, he was a giving man.
In reality, he was the killer who'd come to be known as the Grim Sleeper.
To find out he was a killer, it was really, really gnarly feeling.
To kill women, really? Women that's already defeated by drugs and alcohol.
Police say these pictures suggest there may be more victims.
I just think it's absurd to think that he just stopped one day and then started up another day 14, 13 years later.
There's no way of really knowing how many women he murdered.
August 10th, 1985. It's a warm Saturday morning in South Central Los Angeles. And while the sun is shining, a dark cloud is forming over the community, one that will hang over South Central for the next 2 decades. In the rear alley of 1017 West Gage Avenue, a man walking his dog stumbles upon the body of 29-year-old Deborah Jackson.
Deborah Jackson was found with 3 .25 caliber gunshot wounds to her chest in an alleyway dumped like trash.
She was laying underneath this piece of carpet. There was a purse by her head. Her clothing was still on, intact. However, there was significant decomposition that we saw with her body.
Detectives are summoned to the scene.
They were able to identify Deborah by a phone number in her purse. They reached out to her recent ex-girlfriend, who actually had been expecting for her to come by and get some belongings, but she had never showed up.
It appeared as though she had been in that alley covered up for several days.
For these overworked investigators, Deborah's apparent murder is just another in the city's body count, which by the end of the year will total more than 1,300 homicides.
South Central LA, particularly when these murders were happening, was a pretty depressed area. A lot of drug dealing at the time. This is the crack epidemic in the 1980s. And I think that there was a lot of collateral crime going on in the area at the time.
It was the Wild Wild West. I mean, there would be times you'd be at a crime scene, you could hear gunshots, and you'd listen to the radio and just tell your partner, all right, you finish this one, I'll go start the next one.
As CSIs transport the body to the county medical examiner's office, detectives interviewed Deborah's friends and family. They learned that Deborah was a hard-working mother of 3 who was seeking to regain custody of their children after battling addiction and poverty.
She was staying with a lovely couple that had taken her in, and then one evening she mentioned she needed to step out and to repay a debt. Deborah was walked to the door and never seen again.
The couple whom Deborah was living with have no idea who she was going to meet or the nature of the debt. But the subsequent autopsy reveals that in addition to the 3 .25 caliber bullets in her body, cocaine was present in Deborah's system.
And investigators was trying to find out what this means. Is it possible that she had used drugs recreationally like the night before? That maybe this killing was a drug deal gone bad? Could somebody have possibly drugged her? The only evidence that they really had was the bullets that was found in Deborah's body. And during this time, law enforcement were understaffed, so Deborah's case went cold and her file just got shoved somewhere.
What detectives don't realize at the time is that Deborah Jackson will be the first of many victims. And the monster who took her life is sitting in his house just 2 miles away, wearing the mask of a family man and beloved neighbor. And while he will one day be known as the Grim Sleeper, at the time of Deborah's murder, he was simply known as Lonnie Franklin Jr. Lonnie David Franklin Jr. was born on August 30th, 1952, to parents Ruby and Lonnie Sr. Lonnie was raised alongside his younger sister, Patricia, in South Central Los Angeles, where he would live for most of his life.
Lonnie Franklin had a very good upbringing, strict upbringing, and a loving upbringing.
Attracted by the booming blue-collar job market, Lonnie's parents were part of an influx of black families to L.A. in the 1940s.
They really came for a better life, right? The work industry was booming here in L.A.
Lonnie Jr. showed an interest in cars at an early age. His father, a hard-working longshoreman, cultivated his son's passion, teaching him about auto maintenance and putting him behind the wheel of a car at just 7 years old. While good with his hands, Lonnie Jr. struggled in school, both academically and socially.
He always felt the reject at school. He was always picked on for his size, being short, and his size being fat.
He did struggle a lot in school, mainly with reading and writing, and he just couldn't catch on.
In 1966, at age 14, Lonnie's dad gave him his first car, and the teen began cruising around South Central LA. During that time, the battle for civil rights was at its peak, and racial tensions were running high. Black communities were raising their voice against police brutality, often paying a steep price.
The Watts riots and had the newspapers and media talking about what we as Black people knew the relationship with the police to be.
When the riots broke out, LAPD during that time didn't have a great reputation with the community. They were known to be, very businesslike and rough.
About 34 people died in that riot. It just skyrocketed the distrust that the African-American community already had for the police in the LA area.
Lonnie grew up in the heart of all this drama. By the middle of high school, he actually ends up transferring to what's considered a really good school in Compton. So this gave his parents hope, like he's finally gonna get on the right track. He's finally gonna focus on his academics.
But the wave of civil unrest was being felt in Compton just as much as South Central. When coupled with Lonnie's love of cars, it made for a bad mix. At the age of 16, Lonnie was arrested twice for grand theft auto. The following year, he was arrested on a burglary charge.
Right before graduation, he actually ended up getting into a fight, which caused him to be expelled from high school.
After being expelled from school, Lonnie worked at a grocery store for a couple of years. But Lonnie's father encouraged him to chart a different course.
Because of everything that was going on in Lonnie's life, his dad actually suggested that he joins the Army. And Lonnie was thinking, hey, I'm gonna see the world.
In 1971, Lonnie enlisted in the U.S. Army and began basic training. 6 months later, the 19-year-old found himself stationed in Stuttgart, Germany.
At 21 years old, Lonnie was thriving in the Army. He had worked his way up the ranks. He had a job in the kitchen. He was a kitchen supervisor. While it seems like everything was going good, behind the scenes, he was actually returning back to his deviant ways. This is really where we begin to see Lonnie's dark side.
One night in April 1974, while still stationed in Germany, Lonnie and 2 other soldiers committed a brazen and brutal sexual assault.
He and a couple other servicemen were driving down the road. They tried to kidnap a gal off of a tram stop. They gang raped her, and he took photos of her.
Held at knife point and fearing for her life, the 17-year-old victim, known in court records as Ingrid W., feigned interest in Lonnie.
As you can imagine, she was traumatized from being gang raped. However, what is so telling about Lonnie Franklin is the arrogance that he displayed. He asked our victim, before they dropped her off, if she wanted his number.
After she reported him, she actually set up a sting operation with the police. She called him, she said, hey, do you want to go out for a date? And when he met her, the police arrested him right then and there.
On December 20th, 1974, Lonnie was sentenced to 3 years and 4 months in prison.
He was sentenced to 3 years and 4 months for the sexual assault, and he only did part of his time.
Lonnie is dishonorably discharged from the Army and comes back to the United States to start another life.
So it's almost like nothing happened. He had a fresh slate.
Now 23, Lonnie returned to South Central LA and began working odd jobs. By now, Lonnie's South Central neighborhood was feeling a massive economic shift.
Corporations that had enticed so many African Americans to come from the South were taking their jobs to other markets that were less expensive.
A lot of jobs disappeared and the factory shut down. A lot of people had to find different ways to make money, and a lot of people chose to turn to drugs instead. So that's kind of when the community started going, in the wrong direction, and a lot of crime started to skyrocket.
As he readjusted to civilian life in his changing neighborhood, Lonnie met 21-year-old educator Sylvia Castillo, a popular community figure originally from the Central American country of Belize.
Sylvia was a very straight-laced principal in the neighborhood. She also took care of elderly people, so she worked a lot.
From the outside looking in, everything was just great with them. They seemed like they were happy together.
Lonnie Franklin was very personable. He would talk to everyone. He was one of those people where if you needed something, he'd get it for you.
If you said you need a refrigerator, he would get a refrigerator for you. You could go to him and ask him, could you borrow a couple of dollars? He would lend you a couple of dollars.
The couple married and had 2 kids together, Crystal, born in 1978, and Christopher, born in 1981. The same year his son was born, Lonnie sought out a job with benefits to support his young family. He landed a position doing what he did best, working with cars.
He used to work on LAPD cars, didn't work with the LAPD, but worked on their cars.
After a year, Lonnie traded in his mechanic position for a higher paying role as a garbage collector with the LA Sanitation Department. On the surface, the Franklins seemed like a normal working class family.
From outside in, it looked like they were a family unit, 2 parents going to work. On the weekends, they would barbecue, have people over. They seemed like they were a normal, happy family.
However, slowly but surely, Lonnie started living a double life, a friendly neighbor by day and a killer by night. September 1985. It's been 1 month since Deborah Jackson was found dead in a south-central Los Angeles alley. Swamped with a wave of unsolved homicides, the LAPD is no closer to identifying Deborah's killer than they were the day she was discovered.
Back in the 80s, there were hundreds of young women that were found murdered. The reason there were so many active killers was, again, the crack epidemic. People would do just about anything for a little hit of crack cocaine. And these guys would prey on that.
And on the streets of South Central, several of the murders have a similar MO, which leads police to believe they have a single serial killer on their hands.
There were many women being killed in similar ways in South Central. They were women of color, but they were also women who'd fallen on hard times. They were being murdered one by one, being left in alleys, often strangled.
Though they have no concrete evidence tying the murders to a single killer, they dubbed the unknown assailant the South Side Slayer. Initially, they released little information about their theory, fearing too much publicity could hinder their investigation. But in September 1985, they decide a press conference might bring them more answers.
They were on the look for a serial killer. They did not narrow it down to what specific area it was in. They just said there was a serial killer at large. I knew it was a lot of black women that were getting killed and found in different places, but over in Inglewood, they were getting found in trash cans and stuff.
When this press conference finally came out, it came out that at least 13 of these South Side Slayer murders was kept under wraps.
There were many activists at the time raising hell about who are killing these people of South Central.
Police struggle to find the connective tissue tying all these crimes to the alleged South Side Slayer, while also dealing with their self-created PR nightmare. A local South activist, South Central resident Margaret Prescott, forms a coalition whose sole goal is to ensure that the LAPD is doing everything in its power to solve these killings.
Margaret Prescott and her organization, the Black Coalition Fighting Back Serial Murders, were on the ground in the community, handing out flyers, talking to people, and applying pressure.
They were really demanding answers, and we needed that. We needed an advocate in South Central Los Angeles, someone to speak up, someone that looked like us. Her organization really put LAPD on the hot seat.
The Los Angeles Police Department finally puts together a task force to find the South Side Slayer. Now they're finally going to start to put some of the pieces of this puzzle together and get into the community and discover who this killer may be.
It isn't long before the so-called South Side Slayer appears to strike again.
Almost a full year later, on August 12, 1986, 35-year-old Henrietta Wright was found in an alley wrapped in a blanket.
A mattress had been placed over her, and she was left in an alleyway with 2 .25 caliber gunshot wounds to the chest.
Her shirt was pulled up above her breast, her shorts and undergarments were missing, and there was a piece of a man's shirt stuffed in her throat.
She had a lot of blood around her mouth. We assume that gag was put down her throat to prevent her from screaming while she was being murdered.
We never recovered any casings at the scenes.
Based on the totality of the circumstances, no shell casings from a .25 auto, and her position in the alley. To investigators, that was clear evidence of being murdered elsewhere and then dumped.
After talking to Henrietta's family, police learned that she had been struggling, she had been homeless, she had been living out of hotels.
Henrietta was a single mom of 5. She worked in a cafeteria during the day and sometimes as a cocktail waitress at night. After a fire destroyed her home, Henrietta was sent into a spiral.
Like so many others, Henrietta had turned to crack cocaine just to deal with the problems in her life.
Crack is basically a derivative of cocaine, and it's actually more addictive. So it was hard to kick the habit, and you saw more and more people using the drug, essentially just throwing their lives in a way down the drain because they were so wrapped up in their addiction.
And like the other murders being lumped under the banner of the Southside Slayer killings, Henrietta Wright made the perfect target. But what police don't understand is that the murders of Henrietta Wright and Deborah Jackson some 13 months earlier weren't committed by the so-called Southside Slayer. They were simply the first of many murders that would be committed by Lonnie Franklin. Lonnie's MO of shooting his victims with a .25 caliber handgun differed in both method and weapon of choice from the other Southside Slayer homicides, which made police wonder if there was a new serial killer in South Central, giving the Southside Slayer a run for his money.
The bullets that was taken out from her body actually matched the bullets in Deborah Jackson's body. So a lot of these women that had been murdered had previously been strangled, but now you have two that have been shot, which was very confusing for law enforcement because typically when we have a serial killer, they stick to their same MO.
After the second murder, they knew that somebody was using this .25 caliber gun. And they notified all the divisions. We're looking for somebody murdering women with a .25 auto.
But even with the evidence tying Deborah Jackson and Henrietta Wright's murders to one another, police are no closer to identifying Lonnie Franklin as their killer.
We just had so many victims with no witnesses, no good leads. It's frustrating to us.
Many of the women murdered were Jane Does. They may or may not have been reported missing. They may have been transient. They may not have been from the area. Without having an identity or a place to start from, it makes for a very difficult investigation. You don't know if it's a single incident, if it's tied and associated to other murders, if it's tied and associated to a particular killer.
And it's amid this chaos and confusion that Lonnie Franklin claims his next victim and seemingly decides to taunt the police. January 10th, 1987.
I'd like to see the police station report.
Yes, I'd like to report a murder or a dead body.
Where at?
The address is 1346 East 56th Street, in the alley. The guy that dropped her off was driving a white and blue Dodge van.
Did you get a look at him?
I didn't see him.
What's your name?
Oh, I don't stand anonymous. I know too many people. Okay then, bye-bye.
Police had no idea who this man was, but they started to wonder, is this actually the killer?
We always thought, is that the suspect calling? Is he playing games? I mean, it'd be like an arsonist sitting down the street, just watching the fire and stuff and all the chaos that he's created.
Officers are dispatched to the address that this man gave. Sure enough, they find the body of another Black woman.
She was found with this gas tank that somebody had removed from a car. So it was quite large, covering 3/4 of her body. The top half of her body was in a garbage bag. When coroner investigators removed the bag, they could determine she was shot.
It's a scene like so many others LA police have encountered. Only this time, there's a credible lead.
The guy that dropped her off was driving a white and blue Dodge van.
Hours later, detectives locate the blue and white van in a church parking lot about 5 miles from where the body was found. The engine is still warm, but there is no sign of the driver.
They find out that it belongs to the church. So then they start investigating everybody belonging to this church. There's nothing found in his van. And all the interviews with church officials, well, that's a dead end as well. This brings police back to their original theory. Was this 911 call, was it made by the killer? And was this just kind of a ploy to throw them off the scent?
With no credible leads, detectives turn their attention to identifying the victim. Fingerprint analysis identifies the woman as 23-year-old Barbara Ware. Police track down Barbara Ware's family and deliver the news.
My husband told me the police had come by his business to tell him that they had found Barbara dead. They couldn't tell us too much at that time, just that they had found her. She had been shot. For the first few days after we got the news, it was devastating. Naturally, we didn't know what to do, which way to turn. Barbara was a very charismatic person. She never met a stranger. She was very outgoing, but she didn't back down from anybody. I don't know what happened. She got in with the wrong people or into drugs at that time.
During the autopsy, the medical examiner determines that Barbara's fatal gunshot wounds were caused by a .25 caliber bullet.
And the markings that they noticed on these bullets were compared to the bullets recovered from Henrietta Wright and Deborah Jackson. The examiners concluded that the bullets from each of those victims were all fired from the same firearm.
Increasingly convinced that these three murders were committed by someone other than the Southside Slayer, police form a separate, smaller task force dedicated to solving them.
Police once again decide not to inform the public, and they again keep that under wraps as well. You would think that they learned their lesson from the first time when they kept this information from the public and everyone distrusted them.
The silence seems to give Lonnie Franklin carte blanche to ramp up his killing spree. And between April 1987 and September 1988, he takes the lives of 4 more women.
On April 15th, 1987, 26-year-old Bridita Sparks was found shot, beaten, and strangled. On October 31st, 1987, 26-year-old Mary Lowe was found shot in an alley, and she was also deceased. She had left her home to go to a party, but she never returned. On January 30th, 1988, 22-year-old Lucretia Jefferson was found deceased as well and shot. On September 11th, 1988, 18-year-old Alicia Alexander, and this is the youngest victim to date. She left her home to casually go to the store, but she never returned, and she was later found shot to death in an alley as well.
Lonnie Franklin's body count has risen to 7. And in several of the cases, Lonnie also sexually assaulted his victims.
In a number of these cases, there was DNA collected from the bodies, along with the bullets.
Each of them are shot from the left by the same gun. It's a .25 caliber pistol. Shot them from the left side. So in other words, he's in the driving seat, they're in the passenger seat, and he's shooting them back. And then he would drive them into an alleyway and dump them in dumpsters.
We're still a few years away from having that DNA technology, as well as any type of DNA database. So what they were limited to was looking at those serology results. So they would look at broad identifying factors such as blood type. The issue with serology, it's a good starting point, but it's not as discriminating as DNA. They also could look at certain proteins and develop a protein profile for semen from a vaginal swab or blood left at a scene. But again, once you get those results, the question is, who's the killer, and we need to find a suspect. The establishment of the CODIS database by the FBI did not begin until the mid-90s, so there's no computer that they can enter these results into to try to find a suspect.
Lonnie Franklin is now killing more frequently, and he's becoming way more daring.
But while Lonnie Franklin's killing spree has escalated, by day he still seems to be living an average working-class life.
He was like a pillar of the community, of the neighborhood. Everybody be like, "Hi, Mr. Lonnie," you know. And he said, are you guys being good today? He was always in his front yard talking to everybody that walked by.
Only now, Lonnie is out on medical leave from his 9-to-5 at the sanitation department after claiming that an on-the-job injury disabled his right arm.
When Lonnie Franklin Jr. went out on disability, he had to find other ways to make a living. You know, he was the neighborhood mechanic, so he was able to keep income coming into the home and keep it under the radar from his family.
He was a auto mechanic that would get cars at these pick-aparts and all that. So he was known for taking the cars, flipping them, putting stolen plates on them, and then getting rid of the cars.
Lonnie has 2 small children in elementary school, and his wife, Sylvia, is working nights. After the kids go to bed, this gives him ample opportunity to go out and find the victims.
From the neighbors that I spoke to, I don't think that people ever really thought that there was a really darker side to him. I don't think there was any real thought that this was the monster whom he later turned out to be.
From 1985 to 1988, Lonnie Franklin raped and murdered at least 7 women, with less and less downtime between crimes, all while avoiding suspicion by police. But then, for reasons unknown, Lonnie's killing spree suddenly stops.
We see in investigations that this happens when someone has a huge life change happen.
In the early 90s, neighbors were noticing some seismic shifts in Lonnie's marriage. His wife was rarely around anymore, and it appeared their relationship was on the rocks.
He wasn't as friendly. He was a little bit more stricter with Christopher. He wasn't helping people as much. He still did some random cars here and there, you know, but he was just like more withdrawn.
Around this time, Lonnie was also catching more attention than he liked from the police.
Law enforcement started investigating Lonnie over his disability claim. There was some evidence that it may have been a false claim. He was filing multiple claims. Lonnie was arrested for burglary, 2 non-fatal assaults, and also carrying a firearm. At one point, he also did 4 months in county for grand theft auto as well. He really is under a microscope with law enforcement, so he just decided to lay low before he got caught with the murders. It's crazy to think that Lonnie was right under law enforcement nose. I mean, he was in and out of the system for decades, but just not for the murders. Like, he was right there.
With Lonnie no longer killing innocent women, the investigation into the .25 caliber killings goes dormant. By the early 2000s, the city of Los Angeles was beginning to gain control over both the crack epidemic and gang violence.
The crime was definitely calming down in the 2000s. They had more gang task force around, you know, so it wasn't a whole lot of gangs running in and out of the neighborhoods.
With crime on the downturn, the LAPD could finally refocus their effort on solving cold cases once deemed unsolvable.
We began a cold case unit in November of 2001. 6 people were chosen. I was one of the 6.
DNA analysis technology also made great strides in the past decade. And with those advances, the cold case unit has a chance to reopen almost 9,000 unsolved murders that occurred between 1960 and 1997, including the 7 murders Lonnie has committed.
California had a database. It was part of CODIS with the national database. At first, it was only for sexual predators or convicted sexual predators. And then ultimately, with Prop 69, it expanded to most felons. And with every day, with arrests made, we were expanding the database.
A new detective might see and say, hey, this piece of evidence, we can send this for DNA testing now that we have these advanced procedures.
So we started screening all the cases one by one and seeing if we have the evidence.
Among the first cold cases the LAPD ran through the DNA database were the .25 caliber murders from the 1980s.
We had these women that were murdered by someone using the same firearm. I could tell that on 3 of them, DNA had been collected from the bodies. They did sexual assault kits. With that, I made a submission to our laboratory.
Detective Shepard asks the lab to run the unknown male's DNA profile through their database to see if it can connect the suspect to DNA collected from more recent homicides. It doesn't take long to hit pay dirt.
Well, boom, we've got another case. Valerie McCorvey.
July 11th, 2003. Valerie McCorvey was found dead in an alleyway. She had been sexually assaulted violently, and she'd been strangled to death.
Valerie was a mom. She had struggled off and on with her sobriety and drug use and was trying to get clean.
The cold case detectives also connect the same DNA profile to another recent homicide. The murder of 15-year-old Princess Bartholomew, a runaway whose nude body was found in an alley in Inglewood on March 9th, 2002.
The DNA that was found on both Valerie and Princess matched the DNA evidence from the 80s murders, the .25 caliber murders. But the difference with these murders was these women had been beaten and strangled. So the killer had changed the MO.
Though the methods may have changed, it appears Lonnie Franklin is killing once again.
They didn't know who it was, but they knew it was the same guy. He'd come back. And there was something really ominous and eerie about that. He's come back to haunt us, and he's killing more people.
Maybe he just thought that he was outsmarting law enforcement by changing his MO again. But why leave DNA behind? A lot of these killers, they be trying to outsmart the police, but they don't think of everything. And that's definitely something that wasn't well thought out.
However, Lonnie's identity is still unknown to police. That's because, despite multiple arrests over multiple decades, Lonnie was never charged with the type of crime that required police to swab him for DNA.
The DNA data bank was only limited to certain crimes. Murders, rapists, or assault with some serious bodily injury. It wasn't just like, oh, you got arrested for grand theft auto, you're in the database.
Law enforcement has this DNA, but they don't have anyone to match it to. This killer is literally not in the system at all.
Over the next 3 years, investigators search in vain for their unidentified serial killer. And in 2007,
Genesia Peters, 25 years old, mom of 1 young son, was found January 1st, 2007. Genesia had struggled with drug addiction, but was working hard to get her life on a better track. She had recently enrolled in a local school to study computer science.
Genesia Peters was found dead inside of a garbage bag. She had been shot once in the back, but because the bag was actually zip tied when she was put in it, she was still alive and ended up just asphyxiating inside of the bag. Investigators were able to test DNA on the actual zip tie, and they were able to get a DNA profile.
We know these murders are connected because DNA and the ballistics connects him. We don't have the gun, and we don't have a name to the DNA. So who is he? How do we find him?
After creating a map of where all 10 victims were found, investigators realized that 2 of them were discovered in almost the exact same location, 20 years apart.
Vernita Sparks was found in a dumpster around 95th and Western. Years later, we have Janisha Peters, found in a dumpster around 95th and Western. Why is he going to this location? Does he live near here? I started running license numbers of the people that live there to get names and looking for records. I'm looking for a sexual predator, that's somebody who's not in custody, who has a history of arrest for sexual assaults. And there are some spooky people out there. We sent surveillance teams out on some of these people, and they were following people where they're trolling.
But none of them are Lonnie Franklin. With the police no closer to identifying their suspect, and with Lonnie now actively killing again, detectives shift their focus from the present day and revisit the case files from the original 1980s murders. Almost right away, they discover a critical piece of evidence that seems to have been lost in the shuffle.
Going back through all the cases I'd gone through, I saw there was one survivor. That was a woman named Anitra.
In 1988, there was a young woman named Anitra Washington who actually survived an attack, and it was a gunshot. She was actually shot by a .25 caliber pistol, which was the same caliber pistol that Lonnie Franklin used to shoot his victims.
Though Anitra talked to police at the time of the crime, nothing ever came of it.
We re-interview her. And again, you're talking several years later, and I'm sure Anitra was a little perturbed about you're coming to me now. I gave you all this information back in 1988, and you're coming to me 20 years later?
Despite her clear frustration with how the case has been handled, Anitra recounts once again the day she was attacked.
November 20th, 1988, Anitra Washington is walking to a party. She took notice of a car during her walk. She thought it was cool, and then the gentleman in the car noticed her. He offered to give her a ride. She declined, and then he started to kind of bait her. She eventually gets in the car. Everything seems fine. Conversation is light.
Anitra says the man told her he'd be glad to give her a ride to her friend's house, but first he needed to stop at his uncle's house on nearby 81st Street to pick up some money. When the man returned a few minutes later, Anitra noticed his demeanor had changed.
And then all of a sudden, she feels a heat and a great intensity in her chest. She had been shot. She's now trying to get out of the car and is going in and out of consciousness.
Anitra tells detectives that at one point she regained consciousness and realized the man was sexually assaulting her.
She said she lost consciousness again, and when she came back to, she noticed a bright light in her face. Eventually, she was able to get out of the car because when she tried to open the door, he ended up just pushing her out anyway. And she struggled all the way to her friend's house, where she waited until her friend came home and called the police.
Anitra was rushed to the hospital, where trauma surgeons discover that, thankfully, the bullet that entered her chest had ricocheted off her sternum and failed to damage any vital organs.
She'd lost about a quart of blood, but they saved her life, and they took the bullet out of her body.
From her hospital bed, Anitra gave investigators a description of her assailant.
Anitra was able to give the cops a rough description of what he looked like, this swarthy an African-American man with pock face.
And wasn't really threatening looking. She also described his car. And it's also really important to investigators because it's the first suspect description that they had of this guy out of all the murders that he's committed.
Anitra says that after she was initially discharged from the hospital, she took detectives to the house on 81st Street, where she believed she had been attacked.
Turns out Lonnie just lived 3 doors down. And every time they did a canvass of the area, Lonnie would be gone from the area. So he was never actually contacted.
Anitra tells detectives that she also worked with a sketch artist to create a composite of her attacker.
She assumes that they're gonna make the sketch public and that this guy was gonna be apprehended. And unfortunately, they never make the sketch public. They don't do anything at all with this sketch.
Anitra's account in 2007 dovetails almost exactly with the statement she gave in 1988. However, the police now notice a detail about the attack they hadn't before.
The one thing that she did say was about the suspect taking photos of her after she'd been shot. We were thinking, who would take photos of somebody they just sexually assaulted and shot? Who would do that?
Around the same time Anitra is speaking with the cold case detectives about the attack, a reporter named Christine Pelisek has learned of this renewed investigation into the .25 caliber killings.
She's doing what reporters are supposed to do, snoop around, and she goes into return search warrants that aren't sealed. So she reads about all these cases. We meet, and I talked to her a little bit about the cases, but I still don't give a lot of information. Unbeknownst to me, our leak is within the LA coroner's office, and she was obtaining her information from them.
Christine Pelisek's story about the unsolved .25 caliber killings is published in the LA Weekly on August 27, 2008. It draws tremendous attention.
Christine and her editors, LA Weekly, they felt like the public deserved to know that there was a serial killer on the loose. Christine said when she was writing the article, her editor said, hey, you have to come up with a name for this killer. So she decided, after trial and error, to come up with the Grim Sleeper. She said she came up with it after she realized he was dormant for about 13.5 to 14 years.
The shit hit the fan, so to speak. We were still, trying to talk to the witnesses from the 80s series and trying to figure out who's still around and all of this stuff, and we weren't quite ready yet to go public. And then we were forced to go public with it.
I was home watching TV, and Barbara's picture came on the news, and that's when I went, what just happened? And they mentioned something about a serial killer. I had no information. I didn't know there was other victims. I called the 77th precinct, and they said to me, we've been trying to get in touch with you. And I'm saying to myself, I don't think so. If you wanted to get in touch with me, you knew how. So you guys, need to tell us what you know, what's going on.
Forced to shift gears, the LAPD begins asking the community for help, finally sharing information they'd kept private for years.
We had a couple different meetings with the community. We gave them what we had, which we don't know. We need help. We had billboards posted in a couple different areas in South Central of the composite Anitra had given years earlier and what age progression and what the guy might look like today.
LAPD also offers an unprecedented reward.
We had a $500,000 reward issued. Back then, if you got a $10,000 reward, that was a lot.
When we found out about the reward, we were very encouraged about that. We figured somebody knows something. That's a lot of money. And I'm sure that if anybody knew, they would step forward.
Despite receiving over 800 tips, investigators are unable to find anything substantial.
Every now and then we get, oh yeah, well, the composite looks like a guy on Facebook, or the composite looks like that my neighbor and all that. So we'd go out and see if they'd give us a voluntary swap. But these were not our guys.
Bizarrely, they put up a billboard 2 blocks from his house with a police sketch of the suspect. This was what was composed on the information of Anitra Washington.
So the investigators, they just kept trying to look for this person to no avail. But you can only look so much before you get to the end of your road.
There were people getting tired of it. They wanted to work fresh cases. They wanted to move on. So it came down to Detective Shepard, myself, and Detective Kilcoyne. And we're getting close to the ends of our times when we're getting close to retiring.
You know, meanwhile, Lonnie Franklin, he's living his best life. And although it's been 4 months since he's killed anybody, you just never know when he's gonna strike again.
Detectives on the Grim Sleeper Task Force have no idea the DNA collected from multiple crime scenes belongs to Lonnie.
He had a rap sheet, but it wasn't for a violent crime, thus why he didn't have any DNA in the system. He pretty much flew under the radar as just an average guy in the neighborhood.
But a new advancement in DNA analysis offers investigators a glimmer of hope.
In April 2008, California allowed law enforcement to use what's called familial DNA.
With the familial search, DNA profile from crime scene evidence can be compared to the convicted offenders and look for a partial match. And that, depending on the results, can be a first-order relative, parent-child type relationship. And then additional investigation is done on that name and that potential relative to ferret out information about the true perpetrator.
So I made a phone call to the DNA lab in Richmond, California. The director was Jill Spriggs, and said, Jill, hey, look, I've got a problem. I've got a serial murderer here in Los Angeles. He's been murdering women since about 1984, 85. We don't have a clue who he is. We have DNA samples. So she went back to Richmond, and they started doing some searches. She called back and said, so far, there are no relatives that we discovered.
8 months later, Jill Spriggs contacts Detective Shepard again. They still haven't found a familial DNA match for the Grim Sleeper, but the database is growing day by day. Then, in March 2010, Detective Shepard bumps into Jill at a homicide conference.
She says, you know, it's been a couple years. The database has probably grown by maybe another 1 million or so. Why don't we try running your suspect profile again?
It was July 4th weekend. I received a phone call. It was Paul, my partner. And he said, do you want to come to work? I said, what's going on? He says, we've got something. We've got a familial match.
With them finding a partial match in the system, they had something to go off of. And the guy that they found was named Christopher Franklin.
Christopher Franklin is now 20 years old, and that's Lonnie Franklin's son. And he seemed to have followed in his father's criminal footsteps because he commits a felony.
He was arrested for a gun case and I think a narcotics charge. He pled guilty to a felony, had to provide a sample as part of his felony probation.
We did the Y portion of the DNA, which was just the male version. Is somebody, a male within that family line?
They were looking at the uncle, They were looking at the brother, and then they were looking at the father of Christopher Franklin, Lonnie David Franklin Jr. At the time, he was about 56, 57.
Lo and behold, the first record is DMV pops up right there on 81st Street. His physical description is like 5'8" and whatever his weight was. And I'm like, holy shit, this is it. He's right there.
Many of the women that were murdered were found within very close proximity to Lonnie's home. They were found in alleys, near dumpsters, and who would know the best alleys and dumpsters to hide a body? Someone who used to work with the Department of Sanitation.
That was his route. That was his route. Some of the bodies were found probably within a few blocks of his residence. I mean, everything was falling into place.
But before they can make an arrest, investigators need to be completely sure that Lonnie Franklin Jr. matches the DNA profile recovered from the victims.
My boss, Dennis Kilcoyne, contacted every surveillance unit we had. We need a DNA sample from this guy. Follow him until he discards something where we can get a DNA sample. So they did. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, they were watching and waiting.
They were looking for a discarded cigarette butt, a soda can he drank from. Even if you spit on the street, that's enough. They can scrape it up when you're gone.
The surveillance team's chance arrives one evening when they follow Lonnie to a pizza parlor for a birthday celebration with one of his girlfriends and her family.
One of the detectives contacts the manager and says, hey, this is what we're doing. We've got a bad guy here. Can you help us out? Let me dress up as one of your employees. When they need their table cleaned off, let me clean it off, please. The manager says, sure, go ahead. So they go in.
For like 3 hours, he's there at this little kid's birthday party, bussing tables, and he's got his little gloves on, collecting stuff as Lonnie would discard it. And he would collect it and put it in a separate tray.
The surveillance team detective gives them to our people who take them to our laboratory. He apparently did bite into a pizza. So they swabbed the cheese. Boom, we have a DNA sample. So less than 3 days, they came back with the results. It is a match. It's a perfect match.
On July 10, 2010, law enforcement descends upon Lonnie Franklin's house.
It wasn't just one cop car sent down to taken into custody. There were many individuals outside already on the block and around his home. Numerous cop cars. I mean, it was full on pounced on the situation. We have to apprehend this man as soon as possible.
Though the scene is one of chaos, police don't have to look far to find Lonnie Franklin.
He's leaning against the car. And he is just as calm as a cucumber, and introduced myself and Detective Kilcoyne, and say, we have a warrant for your arrest for murder. And he goes, murder? Oh, okay. And that was it.
With Lonnie now in custody, police execute a search warrant on his property.
We're looking for firearms. We're looking for any other evidence that connects him. If he kept any trophies from any of the victims.
That search of his residence was a massive undertaking. I have never, in 35 years with the police department, been involved in a search of that magnitude. There were over 600 items of evidence that were collected.
Among the items collected are several sets of handcuffs that police believed Lonnie used to bind many of his victims, as well as the handgun presumably used in the commission of the majority of the murders. Most shockingly, investigators find a mountain of Polaroid photographs hidden in an alcove behind a wall in Lonnie's body shop.
There were over 1,000 images of women, predominantly Black women, found on these Polaroids. Many of them unconscious, some of them in provocative sexual positions. Many of them appear to be completely unaware that there's a picture being taken of them at a very vulnerable moment.
When the cops saw all these pictures in his garage, they were horrified. They thought initially, oh my God, has he killed like 500 women?
Some of the photos date back 30 years, and investigators have no way of knowing how many of the women were additional murder victims. At least one of them, however, is very much alive.
One of these Polaroid pictures was of Anitria Washington looking like she had passed out. The cops took that Polaroid picture to Anitria Washington, and that's when she was able to say, I wasn't imagining this, I wasn't dreaming. That is a picture of me. I do remember when he snapped that shot, when this bright light went off, and I was going in and out of consciousness. So she was able to actually identify herself, her 27-year-old self from 22 years before, when she was shot by Lonnie Franklin.
Along with Polaroids, police also find numerous pieces of jewelry and women's clothing, as well as several driver's licenses. Lonnie's neighbors are stunned.
Most of the neighbors told us he was a decent man.
My uncle knew Lonnie from the community. He wasn't someone that created fear or anything of that nature or intimidation, and no one in the community suspected that Lonnie Franklin could be a murderer, let alone the grim sleeper.
While the search of Lonnie's home continues, detectives at the station begin questioning him.
Do you have any idea why you're here? Okay, well, we're working on an investigation, and there's a warrant for your arrest, charging a count of murder. Count of murder? Yes, sir. Went over the basic little chit-chat, you know, verifying stuff. We have been investigating a murder that occurred in 2007. And then I start bringing out the photos. I'm going to show you a photograph of this young lady and see if you recognize her. I started with Janisha. You've never seen that girl before? No. All right. I'm sure you probably heard about DNA. Mm-hmm. Okay. Well, your DNA was identified in relation to this young lady's death. How could that happen? I don't know. You have no idea? I have no idea.
He looks very detached, very like cold, and just like he's not in the room. They show him multiple pictures of them, and he claims he's never met them. He even makes some very heartless and crass jokes about how some of the women look.
This young lady here, her name is Bernita Sparks. Wow, she looked everything. Why? No, you said she looked fat.
He just was, I would say, rude. He was rude, offhand, almost arrogant.
This young lady, her name is Henrietta Wright. Go ahead, take a close look. I don't know her. I don't know her. I don't know her.
Lonnie Franklin had the audacity to look at one of these poor victims and said, she's ugly. And that stuck out in my mind as just what kind of a horrible person he was. To say that about this person that he'd clearly killed for absolutely no reason at all.
You pick up these young ladies, you have sex with them, you kill them, and then you dump their bodies in alleys throughout the city of Los Angeles. Most of them not too far from your house. They're trash to you. Well, now the science has caught up with you. Mr. Franklin, your signature is on every one of these young ladies. There's no getting out of it.
The absolute clincher was when they came out with the fact that there was one that survived because he believed that none of them survived.
One of these gals has survived. And she's going to have a grand time sitting in a courtroom looking down at a man that did her some terrible, terrible things years ago. You know, these girls, they can't talk, but we got one that can. You've trolled Western Avenue for the last time.
That's when he got very nervous in the interrogation room because he knew that he was caught then.
I have nothing to say on it. I don't know none of these people, and...
And you think that's just going to make it go away?
No, I didn't say it was going to make it go away. I just had to get an attorney because I didn't know none of these people, so simple as that. I had to get an attorney.
As detectives wrap up their interrogation of Lonnie, other officers are interviewing Lonnie's wife, Sylvia.
I had a brief exchange with her. I asked her about, what kind of person he was, what did he do? And she said, well, it's just a normal relationship. He does what he wants to do. I said, well, yeah, but we knew he would go out in the middle of the night because a surveillance team was watching him, and he'd go out up and down Western trying to talk to girls. She wasn't aware of that. And from examining the house, it kind of looked like he had his own space. He had his own office. I'm not sure if they were sharing a bedroom or not. I really felt bad for his wife. She was very nice and seemed to understand what we're explaining to her. Didn't want to try to embarrass her. She was already getting enough, stares from the neighborhood.
On July 7, 2010, Lonnie Franklin Jr. is charged with 10 counts of murder, 1 count of kidnapping, and 1 count of attempted murder. But the mountain of photographs found in his garage suggests the body count might be higher than anyone ever imagined. On December 16, 2010, the LAPD makes public 180 of the photos seized during the raid on Lonnie Franklin's residence. The hope is that someone will recognize and help identify the many other women who may have also lost their lives at the hands of the grim sleeper.
Police say these pictures suggest there may be more victims.
I just think it's absurd to think that he just stopped one day and then started up another day 14, 13 years later.
These women were dubbed the Polaroid women. Law enforcement didn't know if they were dead, if they were alive, if they had moved away.
Cops were hoping that family members would come forward or even the women themselves to identify them.
One person who sees the photos in the newspaper is the grandfather of Lawana Wilson.
That morning, my grandfather got the paper. When he opened it up, he seen my picture. And he hands my mother the newspaper, and he shows my picture. My mother started crying. She said, girl, you gotta leave this stuff alone. You see this? They got you in the newspaper. They said you're dead. I never seen that picture a day in my life until it came out in the newspaper. I'm like, wait a minute, who took a picture of me when I was asleep? And then I looked, I said, that's that old picture when my cousin gave me that pink dress. That's when I was 14.
The photograph triggers a long repressed memory, and Lawana realizes it was taken when she was raped years earlier by Lonnie Franklin.
That picture of me sitting in the vehicle is the gray minivan that was parked on the driveway the day he did his raid. He took me to his house first, sexually assaulted me, and then dumped me in that damn U-Haul truck.
Lawana never told friends or family about the rape or who committed it.
It sends me into drug addiction, and then the drug addiction sends me into mental health. Then mental health sent me straight into homelessness. Now, homelessness, it turns into sex walker and sex slaves because the drugs have me a slave to the streets. Now I'm jumping in and out of cars, telling myself that I'm just gonna be careful. I'm not gonna get in a car with the wrong person. And that wasn't always the case.
But that's only half of Lawana's nightmare encounter with the grim sleeper. Years later, while working the streets, she's picked up and raped again by Lonnie Franklin.
I just knew he was the same guy, so I figured he must live in this neighborhood because I done ran into him. And I didn't know how to get in touch with the people who knew him at this time.
That's when Lawana's grandfather deals her an even more shocking blow. One that seems to explain why Lonnie Franklin, aka the Grim Sleeper, the man who raped her not once but twice, decided not to take her life. It turns out that Lonnie is actually her cousin.
didn't even know it was him that threw me in a U-Haul. I didn't even know it was him that I was sitting in the car with next on 74th. And little did I know he was my cousin. I didn't know nothing about a Lonnie Franklin or a Grim Sleeper.
Investigators are eventually able to identify and determine the fate of most of the so-called Polaroid women. They now believe that Lonnie Franklin murdered 6 additional women, 2 of which were killed during the 14-year period when the Grim Sleeper was allegedly dormant.
They just didn't have the evidence to actually charge him with it.
We've already got him charged with 10 murders, so what's 4 or 5 more if he gets life without or death or whatever? So I think the decision was made that we wouldn't file it.
On February 16, 2016, the murder trial of Lonnie Franklin, perhaps the most prolific serial killer in California history, gets underway.
The prosecution was under an immense amount of pressure at this point because it's been so many years, and the police honestly dropped the ball a lot during the investigation, so they felt like, hey, this is our last chance.
The trial is attended by many family members of Lonnie's victims. Diana Ware, the stepmother of Barbara Ware, believed to be the 3rd woman murdered by Lonnie, is determined to be there every day.
After my husband passed, my friend says, "Are you going to be going to court all the time?" Yes, I am, because I want them to know Barbara was loved. My husband's not here to represent that.
The gallery was filled with just reporters and victims' family members. And that was it. There was no supporters of Lonnie Franklin in the courtroom. His wife never showed up to the trial. His daughter never showed up to the trial, and his son never showed up to the trial.
Lonnie Franklin brought a romance novel to the courtroom to read during his trial. The level of disconnect and disregard for what is happening, the people he's impacted for the rest of their lives, the children whose mothers he took away, the impact on these families and in this community, it just shook me to my core.
Part of me wanted to jump over that counter and tear his behind up myself.
This is an extremely dangerous man, and you don't want any flubs or leave any possible openings for anyone to say he's not guilty. You want to put forth the strongest evidence and the strongest cases possible to remove all doubt in order to get this man off the streets.
They had to get evidence from 1985 to 2007, proving that it was the same .25 caliber gun, and that it was the same killer killing each of the victims with the same DNA on every one of them.
Prosecutors also have a star witness. On February 25, 2016, Anitra Washington takes the stand to describe the night Lonnie left her for dead.
Anitra Washington had no fear. So when she said who the person was that shot her, she would look right in Lonnie's face, and she said, "He's sitting right there. That's the man who shot me."
To think that she went through this after he shot her and then gonna take her picture, you know, that was kind of hard for me to sit through.
To have the courage to take the stand and face the man who tried to kill her and raped her in court. She's a true hero.
In his closing argument, Lonnie's defense attorney claims his client is innocent.
The defense's theory was some other guy did it, or there were multiple other guys that committed these murders, and it wasn't Lonnie Franklin. There was a mystery nephew that circled around sometimes, but there was basically no evidence of a viable alternate suspect in this nephew.
On May 5, 2016, the jury delivers their verdict. They find Lonnie Franklin Jr. guilty on 10 counts of first-degree murder and 1 count of attempted murder. His wife and children maintain their silence.
It's been 30 years, and we needed this. And it hurted our family to lose her. It kind of destroyed us. She had 5 kids.
We share a similar core to pain, the pain of losing someone that didn't deserve to be lost. I want to remember the sweet little girl who had her whole life in front of her.
It's just unbelievable a human being would be so cold and uncaring.
Most gracious God, we thank you, Lord, for the justice which has been served today.
4 weeks later, Lonnie is back in court for his sentencing hearing. His wife and children do not appear on his behalf, but families of the victims are there to speak up for their lost loved ones.
We just told them just how we felt. You took a loved one from us. We'll always miss that person. There's always going to be an empty chair at that table. Not only did you take a child, you took a mother or a sister. I got a lot off my chest by just letting them know just how I felt.
But perhaps the most powerful impact statement comes from the first victim Lonnie sexually assaulted back in the 1970s, who came all the way from Germany to testify.
Her name was Ingrid. She was the one who was gang raped. She explained how she was thrown into this vehicle with these army men that raped her. This rape could have been the catalyst for what was to come. It gave him the taste of raping and being violent with women. So that woman lived. I don't think he was thinking of being a serial killer at that time, but it did certainly set the stage for what he was to become.
In June 2016, 31 years after he claimed the life of his first confirmed victim, Lonnie Franklin Jr. receives his sentence.
Alicia Alexander's parents say death is the right choice.
But not only does Lonnie never admit to killing any of his victims, he never meets his date with the executioner either.
When I first heard that Lonnie Franklin had died in prison, I can't say I was relieved. I wanted him to suffer a little bit longer, but then I thought that's not my decision to make. This is something that God did because he wants to give him the final verdict.
His body shows no sign of trauma, and an official cause of death has never been released. As for the Grim Sleeper's actual body count, the LAPD may never know.
There's probably other ones that we'll never know about. He was a trash collector. I mean, what was to say they're not in some landfill somewhere?
I believe it took a long time for the Los Angeles Police Department to identify that there was an issue, for them to pay attention to the cries of the community in South Central, because women of color from low economic communities are often overlooked and dismissed in our country. If women were being taken from Beverly Hills, an Ivy League campus, I guarantee you that it would not have taken 31 years to find that murderer.
I think there was a belief in the community down there that the police department didn't care, which is far from the truth. We do care. I mean, sometimes some cases are harder than others. If you look at the investigations that were done in the 80s with these victims, it's what enabled us in the 2000s to be able to go back and solve these cases, things that they had done, things that we had learned. This technology has come so far.
Following this case, my hope is that the police and the community could come together. Detectives Shepard and Coulter tried to really communicate with us. The differences that we had in the beginning, we overcame them. They did the best they could, and, you know, we appreciated all that they did.
The grim sleeper will go down in history as one of the longest operating serial killers to ever prowl the streets of a major American city, all the while hiding in plain sight.
When I first saw Lonnie Franklin, I was shocked at how, he didn't look like a serial killer.
It's very disconcerting to discover that somebody that you have seen in the neighborhood for years and made a certain set of assumptions about suddenly turns out to be a cold-hearted killer. And I'm sure there are a lot of people in that neighborhood who, even to this day, are very disconcerted by the fact that they never saw what this guy really was.
This was someone who lived in the neighborhood for years. And to find out that at the end of it all, he was a killer, a serial killer at that. Living right up under everyone's nose. It was really, really gnarly feeling. You don't know who you're sitting next to, walking down the street with. You just don't know.